but I would have days where I couldn't even go outside to check the mail. Like I would hear the postman come and put something in the mailbox, and I would put on an outfit and be like, oh my God, I look so fat in this. And I would put something else on, and I would try on like 15 different outfits and eventually end up like hysterical, basically having a panic attack, because I was like, I look too fat in all of my clothes. I cannot even go outside to check the mail, because I was convinced that if I did, some random stranger would drive past and look at me and think, look at that fat girl. Like I was consumed by this.
Welcome to the Calorie Conundrum podcast with Coach Strick. Join us as we expand the weight loss conversation to beyond just calories and dare to ask the question, why does eating less and exercising more sometimes not produce the desired results? Here's Coach Strick to discuss this Calorie Conundrum.
Hello and welcome to the Calorie Conundrum podcast. This is Coach Strick, and on today's podcast we have Laura Lux. A former dancer and DJ, Laura is an Australian social media influencer based in Austin, Texas, whose social media journey dates all the way back to the social media platform MySpace, where she had the third most popular page in Australia. In this podcast, we go behind the scenes and beyond the likes and shares to hear Laura's personal ongoing struggle with body image and food. Let's hear what Laura has to say about the dark side of social media.
Laura, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So on today's show, we have a topic that we haven't discussed on the Calorie Conundrum podcast as of yet, and that is relationship with food and social media. And so today we have a social media influencer, Laura Lux. And Laura, can you tell us your story of how you became a social media influencer?
Man, it actually started completely by accident. I joined MySpace 2007, I guess. Maybe earlier, I don't remember. Anyway, the only reason I even joined MySpace is because I Googled myself one day and I found a MySpace page and I was like, I've never used MySpace. And it turned out someone had created this fake MySpace account of me. And it was obviously someone who knew me, because they knew like personal info. And like, I was kind of doing a little bit of modeling at that point, and they had like my modeling photos and stuff. And I was like, this person has created like this fake profile of me, and they have like all these friends and they seem really popular on there. And I went, well, if the fake me is this popular, I guess like the real me must be okay. So I started a MySpace and somehow ended up with the third most viewed account in all of Australia. And that I've just managed to transition as the years went by into, I guess from there it went into like a Facebook like fan page, and then into Twitter, and then Instagram. I haven't done TikTok. I haven't like transitioned there because I'm old and tired. But yeah, it was just kind of a thing that I did. And through that I was a model, a DJ. I've done all kinds of stuff like all over the world.
So for you, it was kind of... you were just kind of there at the right time.
Yeah, none of it was ever really planned. It was all just, I guess, like a happy accident. It just kind of like literally fell into it and just kept somersaulting further. So,
that's a pretty interesting story how you got into this. But now that you're in it, today I want to talk about some of the dark side of this being a social media influencer. And so can you take us back to the first time in like early childhood or early, adulthood, when you first realized that there was an issue around food and body image and things like that?
I don't feel like at the time I ever realized it was an issue. It's something now that only in hindsight I look back on and I'm like, wow, like the signs were there like so early. I guess like the earliest specific thing that I remember is I had this diary, and I know that this was before I was 12 years old because I know which house I lived in, and we moved out of this house when I was 12, and I had this diary that I used to keep like under my mattress, and I used to write pages and pages in there about how much I hated my body. And like I was a kid. So it was just something that has been in my head for so long that, you know, and back then it seemed, I don't think I really understood what I was doing. It was just like this habit. And I would write pages about like hating my thighs and my stomach and my butt and my arms, and like every single thing I would just criticize. And it was like this constant negative self-talk that apparently like it sticks with me now, but apparently started when I was like a kid.
So it started really early for you when you're 10 or 12 or so. So where did it go? Where did it go from there?
So I guess like through high school, I got bullied a lot. I lived in a very, very isolated environment. I grew up basically in what Americans would consider the Australian outback. We moved around a lot because of my dad's job, but I was in a town with 50 people, and then I was in a town with like about 450 people. And then I did my final 2 years of high school in a town with about 4,000 people, but still, you know, very, very small and isolated. So I got bullied a lot. I think I was teased about my body a lot because I did develop quite young. So I had like big boobs when I was 13, and I did get teased a lot because of that. And, you know, always told like, oh, you're such a slut, stop sticking your tits out. Like, and I was like, I'm not, they're just there. Like, that's just where they are. So I think that also definitely, you know, contributed to the negative self-talk. Like, it was just a lot of negativity about the way that I looked for a really, really long time when my brain was like developing. But I don't think I was actually thinking about this morning. I don't think I really started developing like what would be considered serious eating disorder habits until probably about 20 or 21 is when I really started to like go downhill fast.
So what happened when you're 2021? What was going on then?
So I guess like that's when I started going to the gym. I was working in a strip club at the time. I was doing like a little bit of modeling here and there, kind of just as a hobby at that point. But, and I guess this probably was around the time the social media thing started as well. Like, I started, you know, just shooting with like local shitty photographers and posting my pictures on my little MySpace account. But it was definitely around then, like, it was the first time in my life I started going to a gym. I started putting a lot of effort into thinking about what I was doing. And yeah, I just very quickly, I guess, went into this place of, so I've seen therapists for it. I've been diagnosed with something called EDNOS, which is eating disorder not otherwise specified. So it's like I never quite went hard enough to be considered like fully anorexic. Thankfully, never really hit the bulimia thing. Grateful for that. But I would kind of flutter between like, I guess, anorexic behavior combined with extreme exercise addiction and diet pills. So it was not a great combo. Not good at all.
Yes. So there's lots of stuff going on there, obviously. So you explained that, you know, from a young age, you had this negative mental mindset about yourself and your body. But it was, you know, when you were 21, when you started really like being involved in actually actively trying to produce something. So, and you said that was about the time of social media started to come in. You're also doing some modeling, some other things, but how much do you feel the social media played into that kind of downward spiral?
I think it definitely was a factor, but I would say it was kind of an indirect factor in the way that it was the modeling that probably really sent it spiraling down. But the reason I was doing the modeling was to have photos to post on social media. So it wasn't necessarily, I guess, like, people were mean to me back then. Like, the thing is, like, I've been very successful in my field, but I have always been, I guess, not so much in today's day and age, because like the curvier body types are more accepted now. But when I started out, like, I was considered like bigger, and I'm just an average sized person, but in the industry that I was in, I was definitely someone who was considered significantly bigger than most of the other girls that I was like working with or competing against for work. I still remember my first ever like major magazine shoot was probably like a pretty pivotal point. This was for like a Australian magazine that I guess was like Maxim, FHM type thing, but like a weekly thing. Anyway, the first time I shot for them, they asked me to send through my sizes, like my measurements and everything, for the stylist to, sorry, that was my cat. The stylist asked me to send sizes, so I sent them through. And then, you know, like, I have a wide rib cage. I wear a 36 around my rib cage to be comfortable. And I told her that, and she showed up with a bunch of stuff that was like 32, and then just said, well, I'm not used to having to dress girls of your size. So it was just things like that, like, you know, just stylists who would be like, yeah, you're just much bigger than the girls I'm used to working with, and then give you clothes that are like a size 0 when you're a size 6. So it was a lot of stuff like that. And, you know, I was doing that to be on social media because I think I sort of saw the potential in it in the beginning. And yeah, so I think it was definitely like a big contributing factor.
So you're saying that your motivation for the modeling was social media. You had that foresight to kind of understand the potential of what you could possibly do with that.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty good foresight. It's obviously worked out for you. So you described, you know, being a kid and then those issues, and then, you know, around 2021 is when it kind of went spiraling down. Can you kind of describe your kind of worst place where you were at, kind of what your behaviors were and what you were doing at that time?
At my absolute worst, I was probably, I don't really weigh myself these days, but I was probably about 30 pounds, I would guess, lighter than I am now. So I was like skinny. I was taking clenbuterol, which is a drug made for horses. And it increases your resting heart rate and your core body temperature. So you basically feel like you're running a marathon when you're sitting on the couch. But if you work out on it, it's fucking rocket fuel for fat loss. So I was taking clenbuterol. I was taking something else called sibutramine. I don't even know what that is now, but it was just something that I was told would help you lose weight. It was just some liquid that I was putting in orange juice and drinking. There was a point I was basically only eating raw bell peppers and raw raw cucumber. Like, that was my whole diet. And I was doing 3 hours of cardio a day. So I don't even know how I was alive, honestly. Like, I was absolutely putting my body through it. And at this time, I was so convinced that I was so fat that I could barely leave the house. Like, I would go to the gym, but I would have days where I couldn't even go outside to check the mail. Like, I would hear the postman come and put something in the mailbox, and I would put on an outfit and be like, oh my God, I look so fat in this. And I would put something else on, and I would try on like 15 different outfits and eventually end up like hysterical, basically having a panic attack, because I was like, I look too fat in all of my clothes. I cannot even go outside to check the mail, because I was convinced that if I did, some random stranger would drive past and look at me and think, look at that fat girl. Like, I was consumed by this. And like I said, I was probably 30 pounds lighter than I am now. So that was definitely the lowest point.
So you said you've had, you know, you've gone to therapy, they've diagnosed you with, you know, whatever, this or that. And you know, you described from the beginning and your worst. How would you see yourself right now, as far as your relationship with food, your body image, and things like that?
I mean, honestly, it's never going to be great. That's something that I have had to accept, because it is just something that is in my head. You know, it's never going to go away. But it is something that I have learned to manage over time. So like I said, I don't weigh myself because I know that that is a trigger for me. If I can put like a tangible number onto something, it just spirals. Like I know I haven't known my weight since about 2012. And I know what I used to be like with scales. And I'm pretty sure if I was to find out my weight now, by the end of the day, I would be at Target buying a set of scales, and I would be in this almost trance-like habit where I take a sip of water, I weigh myself. I go to the bathroom, I weigh myself. I eat a bite of food, I weigh myself. And I sit there and I track it all with numbers. And it's just a thing that for some reason I cannot do. But I'm at a point where it's like, I know that I can't do that. So I don't do it. And it's like, the frustrating thing about all of this is it's like I'm a smart person. You know, I understand nutrition. I understand how it works. I know that starving yourself doesn't actually do anything. Like it's not sustainable. I'm so aware of all of that. But it's still difficult to sometimes override that voice in your head that goes, well, you just have to not eat. So, you know, I'm pretty good these days. And at least like now I can recognize the habits. If I start like, you know, engaging in bad behaviors, I'm able to sort of pull myself out of it pretty quickly. But yeah, it's something that will always be in my head. Like it's never going to go away. It's just part of who I am.
Yeah, and so that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on, just to talk about this, is because, you know, people are pushing the calories in, calories out. And even if that were true, with someone like you, just having that simple, you know, answer to their problem can send them down a path where it's like, you know, it could take years to recover from going down that spiral of something, you know, being crazy tracking or whatever it is. And so that's why I want to bring this out into the open and talk about it more with people, because it's things like this that it doesn't even matter if calories in, calories out is actually the 100% truth. If your mind is playing tricks on you and causing you to be in this trance-like state, like you said. And so thanks for talking about that, because I think people need to hear like these type of things. And I think it can, you know, people can, it can help people just knowing there's other people like them that kind of have. For
sure. That's why I've always been like super open about it, because I think it is kind of like a taboo subject, I think, like, and it makes people sometimes uncomfortable to hear about it. But I've always just been like, yeah, look, this is how it is. And, you know, I have managed it like to a point that I'm not, you know, it doesn't impair my daily life like it used to. So.
Yeah. And you said something to me when we were talking before about how you've done, you know, interviews before and you had some backlash. Can you talk about that a little bit?
So I think like one of the really hard things, and this is something I've spoken with about a lot of friends who also have, you know, had histories with eating disorders. It is kind of isolating because a lot of people take it personally and they make it about them. So it's like, you know, if I say like, this is how I feel and I think that I'm too fat, people will be like, oh, well, you must think I'm a fucking whale then. And it's like, no, I don't think about you. Like, it's not about you. It's like when I say that I think I'm too fat, it's not like I'm saying I think people who are bigger than me are too fat. It's got nothing to do with anyone else's body. Like, it's a thing in your head. Because the thing is with me, it's a losing battle. Like, it's not a game that I can win, because the body that my brain for some reason has decided is the only acceptable one is not physically possible for me. Like, unless someone was to invent like a plastic surgery that can literally shrink your bones, I will never be the size that I want to be. So it's like, it's completely irrational. And there is no, it's not about anyone else's body. I don't think badly about like people who are bigger than me in general. I don't care about anyone else's body. Like, do what makes you feel good. It's got nothing to do with that. But people do get really sensitive about it. So you do get a lot of people being like, well, you must think I am disgusting then. And it's like, no, I don't think about you at all. Sorry. Like it's not about you.
I'm glad you brought that out too. Cause, especially the part where you were talking about how it's, like you have this idea of what you want, and that idea is like impossible. But for some reason, it's a loop in your brain that keeps you moving in a direction that you hope you're getting there, but it's really impossible to do. So
yeah, like unless I can somehow find a way to become like a 5'3", size 0, like tiny petite girl, I'm not going to be happy. And unfortunately, that is just never going to happen.
Yeah. So now we've got a pretty good backstory, and we've talked about some of the different issues that you've dealt with. What moving on, what the environment you came up in is completely different than the environment of today. I mean, you came up in before Facebook, before Instagram, before Snapchat, and all these other things that young kids are on today. So what advice do you have to the young girls, maybe the parents, or even just society in general? What kind of advice or ideas do you have to deal with this situation?
I would say like my advice for parents would be to just really be aware of the warning signs, like sort of watch the kind of media that your kids are consuming, like listen for sort of, I guess, like concerning self-talk language. But man, like I've often said, I don't know how I would have coped with if I had been a teen in today's climate, like knowing how bad I was without, like growing up in the 90s without any of that. I was born in the 80s. So growing up in that era, like, and I still had all this shit in my head. Like, I can't even imagine how bad it is for kids now with these like TikTok challenges where they're like, oh, if you can't fit through a fucking coat hanger, you're like fat, which, there's just, it's completely insane. And I really, really feel for kids like growing up in this environment where everything's put online and everything is so scrutinized. Like, I mean, obviously we have like a big body positivity movement now, which is great, but I do still think that the issues that kids have to face in terms of like acceptance and accepting their own bodies, like, is completely fucked up.
Yeah. So something you said earlier was the fact that at the moment you didn't know, but hindsight, looking back, you can kind of see what was the issue. So what would you say to like a young girl that's in it right now? Like how would you advise them to like notice the signs or warn them that, hey, this is something you don't want to do? Like, what would you say to them?
I honestly don't know, because I still struggle with it so much. Yeah. Like, I wish that I had the answer to get past it. I mean, I know for me, there's little things like not looking in the mirror. Because I can get pretty bad, it's almost like I get into this trance and I will just walk around my apartment from mirror to mirror, just staring at myself and like pulling at things and poking at things and like imagining sort of like trying to pull my stomach and going, okay, but if it just was like this, and it's almost like this weird narcissism, but rooted in like self-criticism rather than like self-love, because you get very, very obsessed with yourself. So I guess I would say like, just if you're feeling bad, like just try to stop looking in the mirror, stop looking at TikTok, just go out and like be away from it, like do something where you're not surrounded by it.
Yeah, that's really hard, especially in today's society. But I mean, it's probably the best advice you can have is just stay away from that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's really hard for especially young girls, because that's kind of like what they do. And so
Mm-hmm.
telling them to not be like all the other people is hard
I
thing to do and
know.
a hard thing to grasp for them. But it definitely would be a good idea to kind of for everyone, not just people dealing with body image issues, but just everyone in general. There's just so much negativity online, and
Mm-hmm.
it's so you know it's not like you're dealing with real people. And people don't think that they're dealing with real people, and they'll say things
Yeah,
and they'll
it's
do
very
things.
detached.
Yeah.
Like people kind of forget that there is actually a real person with feelings on the other side of like the shit that you're saying to them.
Yeah. And so all the stuff that it just amplifies, like, of what people
Mm-hmm.
say, and it just gets more and more and more. And so everything that people are kind of would feel in just normal life is multiplied by 10 or 100, because things people are doing and saying is amplified through filters and comments and all kinds of other stuff that make it really really difficult. But
Mm-hmm.
so if you were to kind of sum up your experience being a social media influencer, and your struggles with food and body image and things like that, what would you have to say?
I mean, I guess it's all just been kind of like masochistic. Like I had these issues already, and for some reason chose to spend literally my whole adult life in a field that absolutely exacerbated it. But yeah, I don't know. I guess like, but I'm better than I used to be, and I still, I'm not like in hospital. I'm not controlled by it. It's just a thing that I have had to learn to live with.
Yeah, I think that's probably part of your situation, is that your personality of that 9 or 10-year-old girl was the type of personality that would thrive in in this kind of environment, in which it's about, in a way, it's about what you've kind of stated before. It's kind of making sure your body's this impossible thing. And I think it's just kind of your young life kind of perpetuated where you're going to end up, and I mean, I'm glad it worked out for you.
Same.
And I'm glad that you're doing better than you were before, because
yeah, I mean, thankfully I haven't been like that since my early 20s. It was definitely like the early 20s is when it just was really, really like something that was fully just impacting my ability to go to work, to go grocery shopping. Like it had full 100% control of my life.
Yeah.
But thankfully, not anymore.
That's good. Well, I have one question. Is this the famous cat that we're looking at right here?
This is my blind baby. She's so needy.
What's her name again?
Evie Wonder.
Oh, okay. That's awesome.
All right. Got no eyes.
Famous cat. All right. Well, Laura, thanks for joining me today. And we'll talk soon.
Cool. Thanks for having me.
I hope you enjoyed that episode with Laura. This is another example of how weight loss can be more than a calories in versus calories out issue, and demonstrates that for some people, it is far more complicated. And I know some people will want to make the argument that Laura has a diagnosed eating disorder, and that for her, this is a medical issue. While that may be true, also remember how she said that it is only now, looking back at her past, that she can see some of the unhealthy behavior she had when she was younger. And it wasn't until things got really bad before she sought help from a professional. So my question is, how many people are dealing with similar issues and behaviors to Laura, but don't know these behaviors are unhealthy, or haven't been diagnosed, and are being told the answer to their weight loss problems is to eat less and exercise more? I hope you can see now how that simple recommendation, although arguably correct, could be harmful to some people. To find out more about Laura and her cats, head over to Instagram or Twitter at Darth Lux. That's at DARTHLUX. And with that said, this is Coach Strick saying thanks for listening. And remember, when calories in, calories out doesn't work, that, my friend, is a calorie conundrum.
This podcast, including Coach Strick and guests, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse effects for the use of any information contained herein. Coach Strick and/or guests may recommend products or services in which they have a direct or indirect financial interest. To find out more, please visit www.calorieconundrum.com.